What was President Trump's reaction to
I'll
you
try to be quick.
supporting the airstrikes on Iran?
I haven't spoken to the president.
What does that say about your relationship?
The president's been, I don't think it says anything, to be honest. Next
You
question.
received nothing from
Next.
the Americans about that?
Look, we take a position.
Just days after appearing to support Donald Trump's military strikes in Iran, Mark Carney now seems to be walking back that position as backlash grows from his own base and even members of his own cabinet. At the same time, his government is under fire after a senior official suggested India is no longer interfering in Canada, a claim Carney refused to repeat when reporters pressed him for a clear answer. In a surprising press conference, journalists pinned him down on both issues, and in trying to bail himself out, he only ended up sinking deeper. Let's take a look.
Canada has long seen Iran as the principal source of instability and terror in the Middle East. The regime and its proxies have murdered hundreds, including Canadian civilians, and caused untold suffering for millions of people in the Middle East and beyond. Despite more than 2 decades of negotiations and diplomatic efforts, Iran has not dismantled its nuclear program nor halted its enrichment activities. Canada has long supported the imperative of neutralizing this grave global threat. Canada stands with the Iranian people in their long and courageous struggle against the regime's oppressive rule, which is why we support efforts to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. Because Canada is taking the world as it is, not passively waiting for a world we wish to be. We do, however, take this position with regret because the current conflict is another example of the failure of the international order. Despite decades of UN Security Council resolutions, the tireless work of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the succession of sanctions and diplomatic frameworks, Iran's nuclear threat remains. And now, the United States and Israel have acted without engaging the United Nations or consulting allies, including Canada.
Mark Carney did not say that there was any issue with this strike in his initial statement, if you recall our video on that. And I think he saw that a good portion of the liberal faithful didn't really like that Donald Trump and Israel went in to Iran. So it's fascinating that he's now saying, okay, well, damn, I already said we support it. So I can't now say we don't support it. So I'll just say we support it with regret. And he then says, well, you know, the United States didn't consult Canada. Why would they, Mark Carney? Why would they, when you essentially called the United States a big bully in Davos? Why would they, when you keep telling Canadians that the military cooperation with the United States has come to an end? You can't just shoot your mouth off and say those things and then all of a sudden expect, well, you know, Donald Trump didn't talk to me. This is like if you're with a significant other and then you post on Facebook, oh, you know, it's over, I'm not going to see them anymore. And then you get surprised when they don't call you and ask you out on a date. That's the equivalent of this. So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, and say, well, you know, the old order, you know, that's the reason for this. It's not our fault. You know, we're just responding to it, but we should have been consulted on this.
Morning, Prime Minister. Stephanie Taylor, National Post. You have outlined what steps Canada is doing to protect citizens from foreign interference and in transnational repression, but a lot of confusion exists, including within your own cabinet, about what Canada thinks India is doing. So I'm hoping that you can clarify in a yes or no way. Do you agree with your own government official, yes or no, who suggested India is no longer actively interfering in Canada's democratic process and that Indian agents are no longer involved in murders and extortions within Canada? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not sure that's an exact quote.
That is what he suggested.
That's not a quote.
I can read the quote.
I think, we can debate whether you had a discussion that was not for quotation, but if you want to read a quote from something that's not for quotation. These are the words I would use, and it's important. I would not use those words, okay? First point. Secondly, our approach, as I said in response to the first question, is one of, the second question, is one of vigilance and engagement. And we have made progress, but regardless of the progress that has been made, it is our responsibility to have both aspects. First and foremost, to be vigilant. Okay, vigilant in terms of tightening the laws, vigilant ensuring that we have the right resources at the security level, at the police level, in terms of the coordination, vigilant in ensuring that those resources are active, vigilant in ensuring that we are using all sources of intelligence to direct resources to protect Canadians. And then alongside that, to be engaged with countries so that if and when there are issues or even a sense of issues that we are raising them, engagement at the level of national security, engagement at the level of defense, engagement at the level of police, engagement at the political level. All of those. And if you look at the record, if I may just finish on this, of this government in less than a year, 6 major crime bills, many of which address specifically these issues, thousands of new resources being put in the RCMP and border security, huge technical resources also being put in place. That's an odd way to put it, but physical resources in terms of surveillance, and re-engagement, including at the national security level and the political level, so that we can address these issues actually, in other words, today and prospectively, so that prevention is there as well as redress. Thank you.
Very telling. Now, earlier in the press conference, which we're not going to show you because it was a 3-minute word salad answer, similar to that one, he was asked, so what's the deal with India? Did you talk to India about the foreign interference? And he just went on to say, well, you know, we're being vigilant and we're putting in legislation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So similar to what he said there, like they're asking yes or no. Are they interfering or are they not? So the fact that he wouldn't even say, and then he goes on to say, well, if and when, you know, a country does that, China's doing it every day. India's doing it every day. CSIS and the RCMP are on record in the legacy media itself saying that that's happening. This is the crazy thing. And you can see the talking point that was given to them, right? Anita Anand said it yesterday. Carney saying it today. Well, I wouldn't use those words. Well, what words would you use? That's pretty explicit, especially when they said, do you think we'd be going on this India trip if they were still interfering within our country? So then, Carney, then if they're not interfering within our country, then why are you putting in all of these extortion laws? But they're not even in yet. And you say, well, you know, there's 6 major crimes. None of them have passed at all. Because you keep putting stuff in there that is insane and stupid. And you're talking about, well, you know, we're putting in new surveillance. No, you're not. If you're talking about Bill C-2, guess what, Carney? That was killed because it was so bad. Now, I hope all the people that are affected by transnational repression from China and India are watching this press conference, especially those that voted for the Liberals in the last election. I hope you're watching this. Because he's saying, well, you know, we have a great record. And, you know, we're engaging and we're being vigilant. Congratulations, you're being vigilant. You're being vigilant on your bank accounts, but not when it comes to the safety of Canadians. That much is clear.
Abigail Beeman, CTV News. I still have not heard a clear answer as to whether you believe India is still actively involved in foreign interference, and if you would not use those words of the government official, will there be consequences for that official?
There will not be consequences for those officials. Look, there are, in terms of vigilance and monitoring, which we do actively and on which I receive regular briefings, there are aspects of those briefings that I can't share in public, and I'm not going to betray them. I will tell you that there is progress on these issues, and that progress is a product, in my judgment, it's a product of the resources we're putting in. It's a product of the clarity of our position. We will not tolerate foreign interference, transnational repression by anyone. And I stress, by anyone. There's a wide range of countries who make these efforts from time to time. And we will call it out and we will engage with it in a way that is as effective as possible to protect Canadians, and that's what we're doing.
Imagine that. Reporter saying, you didn't answer the question, mister, because your own official is saying there is no more interference. Are you going to fire them? Magically, a Liberal is not being held to account. Contain your shocked faces. Contain them. But Mark Carney is not holding one of his Liberal officials to account. This is breaking news. First time it's ever happened. Of course, it's not the first time it's ever happened. So, again, he will not say. And then he says, well, you know, I get briefings and progress is being made by the new resources we're putting in. Well, how could progress be made by the resources that you're putting in, Mark Carney, if you haven't even put in the resources yet and the laws aren't even passed? Come on. What a joke of an answer. And then he says, oh, well, you know, we won't tolerate it, and if it happens, we'll call it out. Well, you're being asked to call it out, and you won't call it out. In your own answer, you contradict yourself. And this is what happens when all you do is spin and all you do is flounder. This is the same BS that we've been fed for the last 10 years from Justin Trudeau and his government. And all they kept saying, well, we put in Insura, we put in NSICOP, we put in this and we put in that, yet it's still happening. But, you know, Mark Carney's going to call it out.
Alex Ballingall with the Toronto Star. In your Davos speech, you said that one of Canada's principles and the principal aspects of our foreign policy is the prohibition of the use of force that's not consistent with the UN Charter. Now you're saying, albeit regretfully, we've supported this action despite the lack of engagement with the United Nations. So it seems like there's a potential, or it seems like there is a contradiction in those two things. So can you explain how we arrive at that position?
Well, there's a few things, Alex. What I also said in the Davos speech and said today, and this is core, is we take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. We're not going to passively wait for the world as we wish it would be. We would like international law to always and everywhere be respected. Canada's intention, Canada's policy itself is to always and everywhere respect international law. So that's the first point. Secondly, I will observe, and I would take up, and it's not fair to your colleagues, but I would take up all the remaining time in this press conference times 10 if I went through the serial violations of international law by the Islamic Republic of Iran over decades, and all the efforts under the international system to contain those using international frameworks and international laws. It is a failure of the international system that this country repeatedly violated international law, terrorized an entire region, and through extension, the world, including the murder of Canadians. Let's not forget that. Repression of women. The murder of 15,000 of their citizens within the past few weeks for protest. Now, brings us to the question, though, which I think is in your question of the current situation and its perspective relative to international law. And look, the first thing I'll say with respect to that, it's for the United States and Israel to make the case, and for whether or not that is the case. And it's for others, more expert than me, non-lawyer, certainly non-international lawyer, who are more expert to make that determination. And that said, well, Canada was not asked to participate. You know that. We were not informed in advance. We were not asked to participate. Prima facie, it appears that these actions are inconsistent with international law. So we would not have been in a position earlier this week, or the weekend, I guess, to take a judgment that met our standards if we had been asked to participate. We weren't. We haven't made that formal judgment. It's for others to make those judgments. As I said, Alex, we were dealing with the world as it is. So in the context of what's happened, what's been begun, we support the efforts to end the Iranian nuclear program and its decades-long process, regime's decade-long process of state-sponsored terrorism. But we remind that international law binds. It binds particularly with respect to civilian infrastructure, and it binds all parties, should bind all parties. We call for a de-escalation. We're prepared to assist in that. Thank you.
Mark Carney just completely contradicted his entire Davos speech, his entire, what was it, 13, 15-minute Davos speech in about 60 seconds. Wow. Okay. People who were praising his Davos speech, I hope you're paying attention to this. Okay, so, we can't be aligning ourselves with the superpowers anymore. We can't be, using violence to solve our problems, and we have to abide by international law, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Carney, you just said that you supported what you said that you don't support in Davos. Oh, well, yeah, that's what we'd like the world to be, but, that's not how it is. So therefore, everybody, I'm a hypocrite. That's what that's what he just said. Holy moly. The speech that he was praised for world over as nice words. And now he's saying, well, yeah, that's just dreaming. But we have to live in reality. Ironically, that's exactly what Pierre Poilievre said after Mark Carney made that speech. He said, you're living in fantasy. That's all rhetoric. We need to live in reality. So again, Mark Carney proves that Pierre Poilievre is right again. You can't make this stuff up. And yet here's Mark Carney probably having his worst press conference of his career as a politician right now. Everyone is probably just scratching their head saying, what just happened? Unreal. But, this is what happens when you play at politics and when you think it's easy and you try to run things like a corporation. Things don't happen the way you think they're going to happen, and you actually have to worry about support. And you actually have to worry about people doing their job properly. And in many cases in government, they do not. And now you're sitting in India, caught with your pants down, and you have no idea what to do.
JP Tasker, CBC News. Good morning, Prime Minister. How are you? What was President Trump's reaction to you supporting the airstrikes on Iran?
I haven't spoken to the president.
What does that say about your relationship?
The president's been, I don't think it says anything, to be honest. Next
We've
question.
received nothing from the Americans about that?
Look, we take a position. Let me just make a clear point. We took a position, not asking for something. We took a position because we view the nuclear threat and the export of terrorism of Iran over decades as one of the gravest threats to international peace and security. And the Americans and the Israelis haven't taken this action in that limited sense. We supported that aspect. That is not a blank check. That is not us participating. That is not us asking for something in exchange for that. None of that is true. That is just a straight up position. Thank you.
Mark Carney got a little angry at his CBC buddies for calling him out for supporting Donald Trump. Oh, well, I haven't spoken to the president. What does that say about your relationship? Well, I don't think it says anything. Well, but he got angry there. You could tell. There was a complete shift in how he was talking. And he's trying to say, well, look, we condemn Iran for all the things that they're doing. Okay, so you can't say, well, we support it with regret because there's not. You just essentially said, well, you made the case. You made the case for why Israel and U.S. went in there. And you're trying to say, but, we didn't ask for anything. You don't have to ask for anything. He seems to say, I'm not guilty, and I shouldn't be held accountable at all for a position I took on a military action in the Middle East taken by Israel and the United States. I'm allowed to be an innocent bystander, and I can't be held accountable for the words that I uttered as a leader of a country. That's what that answer says to me. Well, because we weren't asked for anything, therefore, I should be absolved of any insinuative meaning as to my words and what that means. Probably shouldn't have said that. Because you look like a very, very weak leader when it comes to that now. Well, just because I put out a statement doesn't mean it means anything. Guess what, Mr. Prime Minister? When you're a leader of a country, everything you say means something. Ask Donald Trump. Ask him. Ask CBC, who takes literally everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth and tries to spin it. So, no, that's not how this works. And it's funny. I believe it was Dean Allison, MP for Niagara West, was at an event the other day, and he was talking to the crowd about C9 and the Liberals and Mark Carney, and he says, when people show you who they are, believe them. This right here, when Mark Carney is getting all upset and ticked off because he's being called out, he showed everybody who he was. And I think we should take Dean's advice. If you didn't know who Mark Carney was before, which a lot of us did, you certainly should now. Believe him.